All right, it looks like we are at the top of the hour, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Some people might be trickling in as we join, but I'll kick us off. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Brown with Daxco and Playerspace, and I am so excited you've joined us for today's session on more impact and less risk. Just a few bits of housekeeping. Everyone has been muted to cut down on background noise. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send them in through the chat or the Q&A feature, and we'll ask them kind of throughout the webinar, or we'll have time dedicated at the end as well. And then also, we will share this recording out with your team. So if there's anything that you really want to share with some other members on your team, we will get this out at the start of next week. So be on the lookout for that follow-up email. And we'll go ahead and hop in. So as many of you all know, childcare programming right now is truly robust comparative to 2019, and that's because your communities, your YMCAs and JCCs are vital. We're not completely where we are in other KPIs, but for 2020, in October alone, childcare registrations was 202% compared to last year, and programs specifically were at about 89% of last year. So we know that programs are happening, and you are providing mission critical work for your teams. And with more programs comes more volunteers and more risk. So I have some experts with me today to talk about our new partnership with Sterling Volunteers that really empowers your team to effortlessly manage volunteer screening. So today we have Kimberly Shuhan, the VP of Partnerships for Sterling Volunteers, and Chris Capone, who's the Sales Director of Playerspace. Thank you both for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So I wanted to go ahead and kick us off. Like we said, with more volunteers, there tends to be an increase of risk management, rightfully, because there's more people working with your community, with kids in your community. So Chris, you work with YMCAs and JCCs across the nation. You have for a while. What are some of the pressures or struggles that they face when managing risk management?
That's a great question, Christy. There's really, I kind of boil it down to four different, problems and everyday struggles that we see our YMCA customers endure on a daily basis when it comes to risk management and volunteerism. And I kind of boil it down to these four, right? So, and I'll talk a little bit about each one of them if that's okay. So, no single source of truth, being in a position where, as a Y, we're operating in a reactive position when it comes to managing volunteers versus a proactive position, enforcing standard operating procedures across all of our branches, especially if we are a large association. And then the last challenge is just making it easy for your volunteers, right? Making it easy for them to identify volunteer opportunities. So to kind of elaborate on that, when I talk about what we see across the movement, where in some cases there's no single source of truth, what I mean by that is just a lack of transparency for key stakeholders, right? Depending on the Y or the JCC, we find that it's not always easy for people such as a CEO or a COO or maybe folks that don't work in managing volunteers and risk on a daily basis to go and find the information that they need, whether that is, I need to know how many volunteer hours we've had this year for our annual report or for consideration for grant money, or just being able to go to one place to see, if I so desired, how are we doing in terms of tracking volunteer background checks or part-time staff certifications across the association. So we see that becoming a growing problem, not having that single source of truth in the movement. And the other thing that I mentioned was a challenge that we're seeing is that too many Ys and Js are in a reactive position right now versus being proactive. And what I mean by that is that despite the best efforts of our customers and Ys that we talk to across the country, many of them are not really equipped with the tools, and by tools I mean software, to manage risk and volunteerism as efficiently as it could be managed. So as a result, there we see constantly, it's a big game of catch up, right? We're constantly just trying to make sure that everyone has background check or everyone has their forms and waivers on file, as opposed to being more proactive and engaging with potential volunteers across the association. Um, the third thing that I mentioned was enforcing those standard operating procedures that we may have as an association. So, um, for example, if I'm a very large or even a smaller YMCA for that matter, maybe one or two branches, and you think about your volunteer sports coaches, well, there really isn't a way, prior to us building out our risk management system that we're going to talk about today, there really hasn't been a great way to, ensure that your program staff across all the different departments at your association are following standard protocols with regards to managing volunteerism. Some Ys have taken the step to license third-party vendors to do that with software. Some Ys are doing homegrown solutions like shared Google Drives, but certainly not as efficiently as it could be done. And then the fourth struggle that we see daily is making it easy, right? Depending on the Y or the J, we attempt to solve a problem, but the end is that it should be easy for a volunteer to go to your site, identify open volunteer positions, identify what's needed from a time commitment and also perhaps a certification requirement. And we should be able to get those folks through the process as quickly and painlessly as possible, because as those of you know on the call today, it's a challenge sometimes to get volunteers. So anything that we can do to make that easier, is the goal. So I would say, Chris, that's a long-winded way of answering what some of those pressures or struggles that we see daily are in the YMCA and the ACC movement.
I love what you're saying around it's already a struggle to get people to volunteer. You're constantly trying to share that mission, but you truly need to cut down on that friction to getting them accessible, but also making sure that there's an easy process to get them up and running so that they can make as much of an impact as possible. You gave us a little bit of a sneak peek by mentioning risk management, but could you just give everyone on the call a quick overview of what it is? Because really the partnership with Sterling's that we're going to talk about is highlighted within risk management. So I wanted to make sure everyone on the call has some insight into what that is.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So risk management is Playerspace's, it's an end-to-end risk management system. And what it's designed to do is help YMCAs and JCCs and our customers, with the 3 M's, right? We want to manage, monitor, and mitigate risk. And so I always try to explain that in terms of, sealing the cracks, right? So our goal with this system is to put a Y or a J in a position to be able to confidently say that 100% of our volunteers and part-time staff are 100% compliant 100% of the time. And the way that we're able to accomplish that is through our risk management system, which is it's a software tool that it does a lot of things. For one, it allows a YMCA or a JCC to post to their forward-facing site on Playerspace upcoming volunteer opportunities, so that if I'm a volunteer, I can go and I can visit a directory and quickly identify volunteer positions that I might be interested in. So we give our customers the ability to take online applications for volunteers. As part of that process, what we'll talk about today is we have an integrated background check solution with Sterling Volunteers. So your volunteers can apply online for positions they're interested in. They can pay online for their background checks if they'd like. And it really puts our customers in a position to create some standardization on the back end of their organization, because we allow y'all to create custom workflows. So for example, how you want to manage that volunteer, as an organization on the back end, which could mean in addition to your traditional volunteer application and the background check that I hope everyone's performing, what are the additional materials that we need for a volunteer or part-time staff member, such as a swim instructor or a camp counselor. So examples of that might be, in addition to that background check, maybe we need to ensure that we have code of conduct forms, social media release forms, various types of training, such as Presidium or Redwood's child sexual abuse identification and prevention training, heads up concussion. Our system's able to set all of that up and enforce that and bring that volunteer through that experience. It also gives you the ability to manage that centrally on the back end. So you'll always be able to see in real time where your volunteers and part-time staff are in the application process. So there's no surprises. You'll know exactly when people are going to expire and what information you're missing on each individual. And then we give you the ability to schedule those folks, ensure compliance by preventing your program directors across the different departments at the association from assigning somebody to a volunteer position that they do not qualify for. And we also give you communication and reporting tools.
So when you talked a lot about the process with risk management, I'd like to do a little bit of a comparison of what that volunteer management might look like for someone who doesn't have the risk management solution. What does that look like as far as like manual labor and process wise for making sure all those boxes are checked?
So, typically what we see is one of two avenues that one of our customers might head down when they don't have a risk management system, and that would be we don't use anything. So we have we might have a fillable PDF or something like that on our corporate website, where a potential volunteer can go and submit a bare bones or basic application. But above and beyond that, we see just mostly homegrown systems, if that's the route that they go. So what you'll find is typically some overworked volunteer coordinator or program director somewhere that is managing a lot of paper forms and managing or trying to their ability to manage like a Google Drive or something to that effect, where the association might store or use as a repository for here are all our volunteers that we've vetted so far, or back and forth with our personal emails at the YMCA, trying to ensure that our volunteers are up to date on all the materials. So usually, if it's a homegrown system, it's something along those lines, shared Google Drives, a lot of inefficiencies that result from that, and a lot of potential risk. And then the other avenue that we see as a good first step, above and beyond, we don't use much for software, would be we do see, and this is a good sign, we do see a growing number of Ys and Js that are licensing third-party technology providers to manage volunteerism. And that's a great first step. And the challenges that we typically see associated with a third-party software that just focuses primarily on volunteerism is that it doesn't, while it's a great opportunity to take online applications and post positions electronically, software systems don't, for lack of a better term, speak to the other various software systems that a YMCA or a JCC might use to run their program, as well as their members. So, if you are trying to manage volunteers and risk with a third-party solution that doesn't speak to your member management system, or in the case of Playerspace and our sports application, a lot of YMCAs in particular, if you look at a pie chart, the most significant portion of that pie chart in terms of volunteerism or volunteer distribution, in a lot of cases, comes from your youth sports coaches. So when we find that a customer might license a third-party vendor to manage volunteer coaches, as an example, well, it's great, but they use Playerspace to build all their teams and add coaches to rosters and create schedules and communicate. So when you have data in two different systems, there's really no way for a YMCA to police the activity that's going on in terms of, ensuring that our program directors are following standard operating procedures.
Awesome. So I want to pivot and talk a little bit about Sterling and kind of dig into that. So Kim, can you give us a brief overview of Sterling and the products and services as a whole? And then we'll dig in a little bit more to the product.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christy. So some of you on here obviously have heard about Sterling, but for those who haven't, Sterling has been a trusted global leader in background screening, risk mitigation, and identity services for over 4 decades now. And our specialty is delivering quality compliant background checks, not only for volunteers, but staff and board members. And Sterling Volunteers is pretty much the nonprofit division of Sterling. And we're partnered with the YUSA, and we currently support, I think it's now up to 65 YMCAs around the country. And our reputation has been built on delivering efficient, high quality end-to-end solutions, which really helps us cultivate strong, sustainable relationships. And this is really a big reason why our partners such as the Y are partnered with us, including Meals on Wheels America, Girl Scouts, United Way. It's due to those efficient end-to-end solutions and trust. And so collectively, we serve over, I think it's around 30,000 clients now, and including 8,000 nonprofits. And we perform tens of millions of background checks annually. So we know what we're doing. And whether you're a small volunteer-run nonprofit or a for-profit company with a large workforce, we treat all clients equally, and we provide a foundation of trust, safety, and care for everyone that joins the Sterling family. And lastly, and Chris kind of mentioned this, I want to touch on one big pain point that we often hear among the Y network is the desire to centralize operations. So not only are we integrated with Playerspace, but for employee screening, we also have integrations with applicant tracking systems, including Kronos, Ceridian, Katie, and iCIMS, which many of the Ys use. So collectively, this is important to streamline those operations, which gives you time back to focus on your mission. As far as our products, I think we have around 80 products collectively, and I'm not going to go into all 80, but specifically, we've got the criminal locator background checks, motor vehicle records, abuse registries, verifications, fingerprinting, and most recently, a couple of months ago, we introduced a suite of COVID testing services, which is actually doing really well. So that's the 411. There's a lot more, but due to time, I'm just going to focus on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Chris, what does this mean exactly when you say a partnership with Playerspace? What does this mean for risk management customers?
Well, the simplest way to describe it, Christy, would be that through this integration with Sterling, our customers, through our risk management system, will be able to, amongst other things, really streamline and automate the background check process on those volunteers and part-time staff that you might be using risk management for your onboarding processes. So what will happen is those volunteers or staff members will fill out an application. They will electronically sign off and consent to a background check, and then we can automate that so that no human being has to go in and check daily to see, do we want to background check everybody? Although you do have that ability if you'd like. We can automate that, and then Sterling's able to do what they do and really provide their expertise by providing an efficient and cost-effective and really robust background check solution for our customers, and then post those results back into our risk management system for further review if needed.
Awesome. Kim, I wanted to dig in a little bit more because we've talked about background checks and want to make sure everyone kind of level sets and says, what are the components of a quality background check?
Yeah, this is really important to help mitigate risk because not all background checks are created equal. In the US, there's not one single comprehensive source that houses all criminal records, and so it just simply doesn't exist. And so to achieve that quality check, it's critical to layer your background search. And so if you think about a piece of Swiss cheese, and there's all those holes. So the more you layer over those holes with different sources, the more you can close those gaps and achieve a higher quality compliant background. So I'll just quickly go into kind of what that consists of. And it really is about checking multiple databases. And so you should always start where the volunteer lives, because 80% of crimes are committed there. And so you want to check the current county and state of residence, because this is where the most updated records are kept, and it is at the core of safe screening. Next, and many WISE are aware of this, and most nonprofits, is the Department of Justice National Sex Offender Registry. In short, it's the NSOPW. And this is critical when serving vulnerable populations, because it is the most comprehensive database that exists, and it provides sex offender information up until the night before. So it's real time, and it houses 49 of the 50 states. The one state that is not checked is Nevada, and they have different state laws, but there are groups lobbying for change to be included in NSOPW. But it's great because it's one centralized database. And what's interesting is that many screening providers will claim that they check, the national sex offender list, but it's clever marketing, because really there is a national sex offender that's part of the nationwide check, but the DOJ is a separate check. So it's really important to ask that question of your screening provider if you are in fact checking the NSOPW registry. And speaking of the nationwide, that's also a great search, because if you cast a wide net over the US and it kind of settles down, it picks up additional criminal records, but not all jurisdictions submit their records into it. And so for that, a lot of times the information in the nationwide could be 30, 60, 90 plus days old. So you just kind of have to be careful with the nationwide and making sure that you're validating at the local level, the county courthouse, which I had mentioned is at the core of safe screening. And that's what we do. We validate the nationwide as well as the NSOPW. And so another area to check is where someone may used to have lived. So we find that about 28% of crimes are committed in past areas, residences. And so you want to make sure that you go back, and this is what the Social Security trace allows you to do, is to go back to check past addresses. And the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, the industry standard is about going back 7 years. So that's key. And then people also change names, and it's not just women getting married and changing their last name. If you have a first name, say of Catherine, and depending on where you lived and what you filed, you could file under Kathy, Katie, Kate. And so checking alias and maiden names are also important if your budget allows. And then lastly, there's also, there's no way you can prevent an individual from committing a crime county over, state over, across the country on a business trip, vacation, wherever. And so laying on top of a different or another locator search on top of the nationwide allows you to identify additional criminal records. And here at Sterling, ours is called Locator Select. And when we add that to a search, we identify an average of 20% more criminal records. So it helps make that check just as more robust. And so really the bottom line, a high quality compliant background check consists of multiple sources. And the more sources you check, you're going to achieve a higher quality check.
That was super helpful. There's a lot of layers to be thinking through, just to get someone to help out with as a volunteer. One thing, Kim, that we have talked about previously to this webinar was the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and that there are obligations. What are some reasons, or why is it important that our YMCAs and JCCs be following those obligations?
Great question. I'm glad you asked, because this is another important component to risk management, and it may not always be top of mind. So as I mentioned, the Fair Credit Reporting Act AKA FCRA, they put in place requirements to protect consumer privacy rights. And we take this very seriously. And it's pretty simple. If the FCRA requirements are not closely followed, your YMCA could be at risk and non-compliant. And this is actually where civil lawsuits can occur or potentially occur. And so we see this when organizations do not adhere to the FCRA's adverse action process. And I'm not going to go into great detail of what adverse action is, but in short, it's a process that needs to be followed when you decide not to either hire an employee or make a volunteer eligible to serve. And this is typically based on something that is found in their background check. So there are pre and post notification letters that need to be sent within a specified time frame. And it's really important to follow that. And so I'm not here to instill fear. I'm just providing the education on the importance of following the FCRA guidelines, and outsourcing to a third-party consumer reporting agency like Sterling helps monitor and track everything. And so by us being compliant, it helps your Y also adhere to best practices and keep compliant. And again, here at Sterling, we are held to the highest legal and ethical standards, and we are committed to consumer privacy rights. And we also provide the best-in-class compliance standards to handle the ever-changing federal regulations and requirements that occur under the FCRA, and this can also help give your Y peace of mind.
Awesome. You mentioned it in your last answer, but I did want to ask, what, in your opinion, what really helps Sterling Volunteer stand out as a provider?
So, there's so much, but I'm going to focus on some key ones that resonate well with the YMCAs. And so, and like I said, there are many differentiators, but some of these are game changers. And really the first is, and it's kind of the common theme here, is quality. We use a combination of proprietary technology and a set of unique criminal locators to access more criminal records at the county and state courthouse level, which again is at the core of safe screening. And so this allows us to deliver the most accurate information on prospective employees and volunteers. And then another one is technology and automation. When people ask me who our main competitors are, I never list any, because it's really anybody who is a technology innovator and keeping up with the rapidly changing technology landscape. And so Sterling does this well. We actually enhance our offerings with all of the feedback that we get from clients, and we have automated more processes to meet the ongoing demands of clients. And ultimately, this helps make your jobs easier and frees up that critical time you need so you can focus on other important projects that fuel your mission. One example is a proprietary technology that we call Court Direct, and we are automatically linked to about 85% of the courts in the US, and so we don't have to rely on those physical court runners. And yes, court runners do exist still, where there's people actually running to the court to get those records, but this allows us to return results quickly. And in fact, during COVID, even when all those court closures happened, we were still able to fill between 95 to 99% of our background checks. And we know some other screening companies fell to about 30%. So that automation, that's why I talk about it, because it is still important to allow everyone to still do business. And again, we have the industry's highest hit rates and the fastest turnaround times. And we do this all through proprietary technology. So those are some of the key ones, as well as actually customer service. And I don't want to forget about that one, because the screening industry is notorious for poor service. And if I can talk a little bit about a net promoter score, NPS, and for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's basically a barometer on client satisfaction. So to give you an idea, in the screening industry, that score is between an 8 and 15. Sterling Volunteers is at a 67 out of 100, which is on par with Trader Joe's. And so we take customer service very serious. And when you sign up with a service, you don't necessarily know what their customer care is going to be like. But we have a team called the Advocates, and we call them the Advocates because they take their job seriously, and we treat all customers the same, and they have a great response rate. Specifically for our differentiators for the volunteer side, I would say 3 key ones are free monthly updating. This has really set us apart in the market. And so basically, we like to think that all volunteers have good intent, but what happens after the initial background check is run and they start serving? So we implemented monthly updating on the nationwide and the sex offender every month. And so that gives WISE and other organizations peace of mind. We also have custom payment options. So if you're working on a lean budget, you can ask your volunteers to cover all or some of the cost. And then we've got this great feature, which I also know is built in on the Playerspace side, the volunteer contributions. And specifically to the YMCAs that we work with, we see that 20% of the volunteers volunteering through WISE optionally contribute to help offset the cost of the check. And that's pretty significant, especially during COVID when you're trying to save money and other funds are being moved around to support other areas of the organization. So collectively, all these cost saving measures have helped out and really set us apart. And just for a little bit of context, in 2019, we were able to save the sector $3.2 million through our volunteer contribution channels.
That's awesome. We've gotten a couple of questions in the Q&A around just like cost and if there's a monthly or a yearly fee. Where should people who are interested in learning more about Sterling Volunteers, what email should they reach out to, or where should they go?
They can absolutely reach out to me if someone from Sterling Volunteers hasn't already. I can, depending on where you are, we've got state experts, which is really important in background screening, so that they can share with you their knowledge on to make sure that again, you're being compliant and following state guidelines, especially if you live in Pennsylvania and Florida. So definitely you can reach out to me, and then I can connect you with someone at Sterling Volunteers. And I don't see my email. So it's, and my last name you can see, but it's Kimberly dot, and then my last name, CHOCHON at sterlingvolunteers.com.
I'll put that in the chat so people can copy it. Another question, and if you guys have any questions, we'll go ahead and open it up to a Q&A here. Another question is for Chris. To access the integration with as a Playerspace customer, do you have to be contracted for risk management?
Yes, is the short answer. If you want to access the integration with Sterling and to take advantage of all the things that we've talked about today, then you will absolutely need the risk management system as part of your Playerspace suite of products. So if you're interested in learning more about that, maybe even seeing an actual demo of how this works, then you can reach out to myself or Brittany Young, and we'll make sure that we post that contact information for everybody in the chat box as well.
Awesome. Any other questions? I believe that is all for today. If you guys have other questions, you can email Chris or Kimberly, or you can email marketing@daxco.com, and we'll make sure they get to Chris and Kimberly. But like I said at the beginning, this is going to be recorded, and we'll send it out at the beginning of next week. So if you want to share with anyone on your team, keep an eye out for an email from our team. So I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thank you, Kimberly and Chris, for walking us through that. It's been very helpful and insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a good day.